Okay, now that you're done with block 1, it's time to do block 2. So block 2 in the main quilt is actually pretty much the same as block 5. So block 2 will go here, and block 5 will go here. And so the video will be for the same block. They're just turned a different way in the hoop. The steps are the same. The fabrics and the threads are the same. So let's get started stitching block 2. Block 2 and block 5, time to go ahead and stitch those. This is block 2, and as you can see, block 5 looks sort of like it. It's just mirrored the other direction. So the video will cover both block 2 and block 5. We're going to actually stitch on block 2. So what you'll need to get going is your battleizer and your hoop. You will need your background fabric B, which is this one. I will also need my background fabric A. I will need fabric 7. My backing fabric for the optional back is fabric 5. If you're using the wool, the optional wool, you'll need that prepared and ready to go. You'll need your thread A. You will need your thread B, your thread C, in the needle and the bobbin for your quilting, and you'll need a regular embroidery bobbin thread. So let's get to the machine and get stitching. At the machine, I've got my standard embroidery bobbin thread in the bobbin, my water soluble in the needle. I've called up my design. I do have my thread cutter on. I will turn it off when I go ahead and put the back on. And we're going to go ahead and stitch step 1, which is the placement stitch for the wool or the fabric. Step 2, if you're doing the optional wool, is to go ahead and place the wool inside the placement stitch and stitch it down. If you're not doing the wool, you can skip this step entirely and go on to step 3. Step 3 is to place your background fabric B over the wool. You're going to allow a 1/2 inch or so of fabric to extend around the outside edge. And you will go ahead and tack it down, still using the water soluble thread. So now that that's tacked down, we do need to trim it. This edge here that is still in the battleizer, that needs to be trimmed to about 1/8 of an inch. So I'll use my little hoop scissors and I'll just give this a trim. So you have just a nice clean seam allowance there. So step 4 is to take your background fabric A and place that next. Step 4, continuing with the water-soluble thread, we are going to take our background fabric A and place it over this open place and make sure we have a 1/2 inch extending on the outside edge. So again, I can feel that through the wool. If you can't feel it, you can peel it back and just kind of make sure that you've got at least a 1/2 inch on the outside edge. And then we'll go ahead and stitch our tack down. So now that step 4 is stitched, all we need to do is trim this nice and close right here. So again, I'll use my little hoop scissors. And sometimes it's easier to take the hoop off the machine. This is a good angle for me, so I just went ahead and left it on the machine. But if you need to take it off to trim it, that's fine too. Just keep it on a nice flat surface. So now our step 5 is to stitch with water-soluble thread. So we're going to keep the water-soluble thread in the needle, and it's going to stitch a placement stitch right over the fabric. And this will be for our next fabric piece. Step 6 is next, and I went ahead and switched out my needle thread to my thread B, and we're going to go ahead and stitch a fill stitch in this area right here. Step 7 is next, and we're going to place our fabric 7 right here in this area, and this will be an applique, and we're going to place our thread C in the needle to stitch this down. So when you place your fabric 7, you just want to be sure you've got enough room at the top and the bottom, and I can kind of feel where the edge is with my fingers. So I'm nicely centered, and we'll go ahead and tack this down. So now that this edge is tacked down, we're going to trim it. So I'm going to pull my hoop off the machine a little bit, but yet I've got it nice and flat on a flat surface. And I'm going to trim really close to the stitching line. And my little hoop scissors mini is fabulous for this because they're nice and small and sharp, and I can get in really close to my stitching. This is an applique, so you want to get it nice and tight to that stitching. And we do give you 2 stitching lines, so if you accidentally clip a thread, your fabric will still be held down. So now it's trimmed, so now we'll go ahead and put it back on the machine. Sorry for the bouncing around. And step 8 is continuing with thread C in the needle, and it will do a satin stitch over your raw edge. The next step is step 9, and you can use thread C again, or you have the option of using thread D depending on the color of fabric that your particular quilt is. Step 10 is a decorative stitch over the top of the satin stitch, and we're going to place thread A in the needle, and we'll go ahead and stitch that. Fabric 5 if you're doing the optional back, right over the center of the stitches. You can just kind of peel it back, make sure it's centered, smooth it out, and we'll put it back on the machine and stitch it. So my hoop is back on the machine. I have water-soluble thread in the needle, and we're going to go ahead and stitch the back. So now it's time for the last step, which is the quilting, step 12. So we are going to put our thread C in the needle and the bobbin, and we'll come right back and stitch the quilting. Have my machine all threaded up with my thread C in the needle and the bobbin, and the back is on. So we should go ahead and turn off your automatic thread cutter if you haven't already done that. So I'll do that real quick. And also I drew my bobbin thread up to the top, and I'm going to hold these threads when I begin to sew. That way I won't get a knot or a wad of thread down below. And then as I take a couple stitches, I'll just stop and trim it nice and close. And we'll go ahead and let it do all of our quilting. And block 2 is done, and we'll take it over to the cutting table and get it trimmed.